so excited to welcome the amazing, the wonderful, the sexpert, Jessica Biles to the podcast.
What up?
I am so excited for this conversation because you are creating space in a space that people never enter the space, which is a huge problem, but they just feel so uncomfortable. Like, people act as if sex is this mysterious thing that needs to be hidden behind a closet. And I got distracted by a train, so I was a little thrown off track, but that's fine because this is not the Karleigh gushing show. So Jessica, introduce yourself. Who are you? And I would love to know why you got in this space to begin with.
Hey, I'm Jessica B. I am your sexpert, or I refer to myself as a sex coach or a sex educator, and I also am a Christian. And all of those words together don't all the time make sense when you hear Christian sex coach, Christian sex educator, but that is who I am. And I got started in this weird space, basically, long story short, about 6.5 years ago. Mr. Sexy and I were broke as a joke, and it really wasn't very funny. And I had a pure romance party. I had gone to parties for a couple of times or a couple of years. And I decided I should do something that sounds fun, that I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm super passionate about women having positive, good, healthy relationships with their significant others and with each other. And I wanted to create a space for that. And at the time, I didn't feel welcome in church. And I've always thought I would be welcome in church. I'm a career Christian, and church was no longer safe for me. So we dove into a sex business. Mr. Sexy did his research after I signed up and said, oh, this sounds like a pretty cool company. I think it's got good values, and I think that you could make money. And I was like, okay, cool. And here I am today.
That is so cool. Like, all of that, start to finish. Yes. And y'all, we're going to get to like all the social stuff. They'll be in the show description, get at the end, but you're going to see reels of her straight up as a dancing vagina. Like, it is the best thing ever. And I'm going to be, so, initially you would have, no, I was on Jessica's podcast because I know words exist. I can use them. And I did not know right away that you were a Christian. I assumed that because you talk about sex, how sad is this? I assumed that because you talk about sex, that was like not even on the radar. And I personally identify as that as well. We love you regardless of what you believe in. But I do think this is so important, especially within the quote unquote like religious circles. So I would love to dive right in as, actually, I want to know what you think is the number one belief around sex that really holds people back, or that really causes it to be so taboo.
I'm going to think on that for a second, because there are many beliefs about sex that are inaccurate. And I will be speaking from the lens of being a Christian in this sex education space. And so there are going to be, I think, a couple of different answers, depending on who you ask, depending on the different niche that they speak to their audience in. So mine is people who believe in a God, people who believe in the God, and people who believe that there's an ordained way that sex is supposed to happen. And off the top of my head, while you were asking that question, I think that the number one belief that is causing problems with sex, and I would even say I think should be across the board, is that it's media, it's television, it's movies. They give us this idea of what sex is supposed to look like and to feel like and to be like, when that's not accurate. And so as a really weird example, Mr. Sexy and I have been binging Scandal like it's going off of the radar, as if we're never going to see it again. We're watching it constantly. We're about to finish the entire season. And all I can talk about and think about is the weird, messed up sexual relationships that are prevalent in that entire series, starting with the President of the United States. And that has sent so many mixed messages of what sex is supposed to be and what healthy sex is supposed to be and what coercive sex can look like.
That right there, this is not my soapbox moment. This is Jessica's soapbox moment. But the way words, now I've got like 30 words trying to come out of my mouth at once and then they all get stuck. The media, I 100% believe, because I look at, like, for example, one of my absolute favorite shows, it's like my comfort show. I've watched it an embarrassing amount of times, is New Girl. I love that show. It's so flippin' funny. I love each of the characters, and I need a Nick in my life. Like, I genuinely want me a Nick Miller. But start to finish, that entire show, I didn't realize it the first probably 100 times I watched it, but the whole show is centered around sex. And it's centered around sex in a way that I don't even know how to explain it. Like, it's centered around it as if that's like the main part of the relationship. Like, it's the only way a relationship is a relationship. Because I remember I was watching an episode, and where Winston and his girlfriend, they hadn't slept together in a long time. And Schmidt was like, okay, if you're not banging, then you're just, a roommate who buys her food. Like, that's all you are. And I am like, I don't know how I did not pick up on that, because I was like, are you kidding me? But that right there.
I love New Girl. And it was a friend of mine who introduced me to the show. And in the very beginning, when I started from episode 1, season 1, I had a really hard time with the sexual constructs of the show. I really didn't understand why Jess was told to go out and bang these dudes when that's not actually what she wanted to do. And once I was able to get past that and see it for the comedy that it is, I really, really love the shows. And Jess is my like inner child.
Same.
And I totally see where you're coming from.
That is, I'm noticing this pattern in just about every show that I watch. And the reason that this is so harmful, and I know people can roll their eyes and say, it's just a show. But I remember watching that after recently becoming single and watching these dudes be like, you just need to go hook up, get him out of your system, go find somebody else. And I thought that was what was expected of me now. As a single person, I assumed that that's what I needed to do, along with all sorts of, childhood trauma and all of that. So let's say talking to somebody like that, who has those beliefs around sex, who doesn't really want to have sex, but they feel like they need to, which is unfortunately a lot of the women that I know. What would you say to them?
To the person who's having sex and or they don't want to have sex anymore?
Yeah, like they just feel like it's expected of them. Like, in the world today, sex is just assumed, like, especially as a single person, now trying to be like, I don't want to hook up with people, but no one's going to stick around if I don't hook up with people.
So there's 2 things to that. Number 1, you have to be open to asking those questions and actually accepting answers and look for those actual answers. And secondly, you have to be able to just start saying no and be brave enough to say no and leave that relationship or those relationships or those people or that circle and just walk away and figure out what do you want for your own sex life. Because that's a story that resonates with me personally, I'm the girl who was having sex when I didn't want to have sex. So I didn't know any better, though, really. I was looking for something that I was never going to get, but nobody took me aside to tell me that, other than in my Christian world to say, here's a purity CD. Here's some music to help you not want to bone somebody. And I'm looking at this 60-year-old woman with white hair who's like the secretary in this church. And I'm like thinking in my head, what the fuck do you think I'm going to do with a purity CD? I'm like 22 years old. If I feel like I want to bone somebody, I'm going to bone them. You haven't given me a reason of why I don't want to do that other than the Bible. And I get that as a career Christian, but I didn't understand that in my heart, in my soul, in my being, that I understand now today, because I was not given great sex education. I was only ever told you don't have sex, period. And if you do, you're not worthy, period. And I carry that with me today. So it's a loaded conversation for me,
That I just got chills because I couldn't relate with anything more. And there's so much to that. But what a lot of people don't understand is like, neither of us are coming at Christians. We're both believers, you know, we both, but this is really important because like for me, I am just now unpacking all of this stuff, but I was molested by the babysitter's son when I was 7 years old. And so then all I had this message slammed in my face was how wrong it was to be touched, how wrong it was to have sex, how wrong it was to have these desires, and how wrong it was because we had to make sure the men didn't get turned on because apparently they're animals with no sense of, you know, impulse control. And so I grew up already thinking that I was worthless. And so unpacking these conversations is so important. But the question that I have is, how did you go from that belief that you are unworthy if you've had sex, where, you know, it's, you just don't have sex because the Bible says so, to being the sex educator you are now? Like, what was kind of the breaking point for you?
The breaking point was laying in bed, surrounded by darkness, with my husband's penis inside of my vagina, and him having the best time of his life, and I was crying, and he didn't know. And that wasn't the first time that had happened. And then he noticed and he said, he pulled out, he got off. I mean, he didn't get off, he got off, he wasn't on top of me anymore.
Yeah.
And he looked at me in the eyes, and he was pretty angry with me, and not angry in a bad way, just lovingly angry, which is really, that was so new for me. And he said, "You can't let me continue to hurt you." And that story still sends chills through my body, because I was allowing him to hurt me by not communicating what was happening inside of me, because there's elements of PTSD that were happening just in the way of just images happening in my brain. Well, I'm trying to make love to my husband, and I've never been married before. This was it for me. Like, this is supposed to be the best relationship I have, but I'm having flashbacks of other boys being in my vagina. That sucks. And I didn't feel safe to communicate that to him, because communicating my needs, wants, and desires around how my body is treated sexually, that wasn't allowed. That's not a question I was allowed to answer. I was told over and over and over again, "I'm going to get blue balls. Can you just finish me off? I know you're not into it, but me. And finally, I actually married a dude who isn't about him. It's about me. Today, right now, this morning, it was about me and not him. And now that can sound really selfish, because you're not hearing his side of the story. But for me, in our relationship, that's still what I need today. And so my breaking point was that moment in our bedroom, and that moment has stayed with me. And so from that moment on, I started to be able to say, actually, while we're in the throes of it, actually, I'm in pain, and I'm really sorry, and I don't know anything else other than I'm in pain. And then he'll hold me and let me cry. And that is how we work through my sex traumas. Isn't he awesome? That was Jesus to me. I've seen Jesus come through in different ways. I've seen Jesus came through in my dad a couple times, and in my husband, I've seen Jesus come through in those moments. That was Jesus to me, and that was him using my husband to hold me through that time. And you cannot convince me otherwise. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, baby.
Oh my God. Like, now I'm just into, I want to take this second, because one, that is something in a relationship I have never experienced in my life. And I know, excuse me, and I know that there are so many people listening who have never experienced that in their life. And you are so deserving of that. You are so worthy of that. And if you aren't enjoying it, you can say no. And if they don't like it, that's a them problem, and they can go jack off in the bathroom. And if they don't agree with your reasoning, then they don't deserve your body to begin with. just needed to make sure that was said, because I'm sitting here, the thing that stands out to me as you were sharing that was when, man, and it wasn't even all that like that deep either, but there was a moment where I was with somebody and we were trying something, and this was just, I don't know, earlier this year, end of last year, trying something new, and I had like this internalized panic, and I couldn't get the words out, but eventually he looked at me weird and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, but I can't. This scare, I just can't, because it's messing everything up. And he goes, please don't say sorry. This is your body. And in that moment, yes, I just lost it. Why? Because the bare fucking minimum was that someone respects my body. And that to me was like, oh my God, like what? Someone's actually putting my, and that was a first for me. I can't even imagine someone actually laying there next to me being like, it's okay, please communicate with me. Like, go ahead and cry. Like this, there's a lot of shit that goes into this. Like, oh my God. Anyway, Karleigh's getting therapy on the podcast, having a moment. Oh my goodness. So sorry. Had to like process through all of that.
Hey, so, this is your show. You don't apologize. You're like, hell yes, this is what I'm here for. What? Like, that's my podcast. I love learning and sharing stories and learning stories and connecting with people. Like, for me, that's the joy of podcasting. And it brings so much value, not only just for you and I, because you and I are, you know, learning about each other and learning stories, but for people who are listening, they don't like, this is just, that's what this is about for me. So don't apologize. Your space.
Do you guys see why I love her now? Like I'm just obsessed. So the question that I have from here then is, what would you say to someone who hasn't experienced that and they want to? How do you, let me rephrase that better. How did you go from that place of, because I know it must have been a big mindset shift, to processing through that moment of your husband looking at you and saying, please communicate with me when I'm hurting you, to now you're sharing so openly. Like, that just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, maybe it did, I don't know, but.
Well, there's two answers to that. And the first part is I've always shared my life way more openly than most people. And it has allowed for a lot of scrutiny. It has allowed for the police to be involved, because I used to blog more regularly than I do now. And there are ways for a troll on the internet to really wreak havoc on your life because you're sharing about your feelings for being a step parent. And I can tell you where to find that blog still. And that was many years ago. So I've always had this drive to be authentic and honest and real. And that is what caused me at 16 to have sex for the first time in a coercive situation that that wasn't mine. It was not my choice. And you helped me. You've actually, our last conversation helped me through that a little bit.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And then it was either that night or the next day that I was leaving for youth camp, or like we were going to Alaska on like a retreat, like a helping thing that youth kids do. And we were doing a round table, like a circle thing around a campfire. And we were supposed to share, I think, our sins, or like let the sins off of our chest. And for me, mine was like, I'm not a virgin. I'm the Christian going with you guys. And it's those kinds of decisions that I've made over and over again to say, this is me. Here I am. And I've made these mistakes and I don't want to apologize for it because I'm not sure that it was wrong. That carries over to today, so that right now I'm in probably the most intense, hard time that I've been through before. Like right now, as you and I are talking, and I can't share that with people because it's too personal, it's too big, it's too much. One day I will. Oh, I will, because I believe in the power of telling your story, because people relate to that. And when people hear the story that they thought they could never tell anybody, and they hear somebody telling it either like at a girl gang cocktail get together, or a podcast, or a social media post that 3 people click the like button on, they read that story and they think, oh, that's a person who went through something like I did and they got through it. I can do it too. I cannot tell you how much I believe in the power of storytelling. And I don't know why I didn't start my own podcast earlier, because that is what this is about, is sharing our stories. And I know I had 2 points to make. What was the original question? Because I know I have the second point there. I just need to be reminded.
What do you say to someone who is currently in that place of not enjoying sex, but they want to enjoy sex, but they don't even really know how to communicate their needs?
Okay. And we talked about being authentic, and that's something that's has always been part of me. So sharing these parts of my life has always been part of something that I've done. Now, to be able to move past that hard stuff, and I will say this, you can write this on my grave, is you have to communicate. You've got to have a person to help you through it. For me, that person happens to be Mr. Sexy. That happens to be my husband, and I'm very, very blessed to have that, but not everybody else has that. And if you're not able to get that from your spouse, your significant other, then who is that person going to be to help you through that? Because is it going to be a best friend? Is it going to be a family member? Is it going to be a therapist, a counselor? Is it going to be a coach? Those are all resources to help you have a healthy, enjoyable sex life, because every single person enjoys to have that. If it's not healthy, if it's not enjoyable, if it's not something that you're looking forward to, if it's something that you're just doing because you want, because your partner wants to do it, that's not what it's about. And the first step I'll always say is communicate to your spouse and open up those communications. They're not always open to that. And so that's then the next step is maybe a best friend. But you need a person. You need a person to support you, because it is okay to realize that your spouse might not be your spouse forever. And that's okay. And I'm a Christian saying that. So take that for what you will. It's a grain of salt. We're all on our own journeys, but you need a person. You need a person to support you and to help you and to understand and hear your thoughts and your ideas and your tears, and just to sit in that. Like, that's how you help someone through trauma, right? What we want when we're going through trauma is somebody to sit still and just be. Whether we're cursing, crying, drinking, watching TV, we want somebody to just be with us so we're not alone. So you need a person. You need somebody who will sit with you, whether you're paying them or they're that kind of person, they can be there for you.
You have such a powerful way of speaking. Like, when you speak, people want to listen. And like, I'm not even trying to get dramatic, but I truly believe like you're speaking to 17-year-old me, like inside of my soul. And I'm just like, I wish I had you 10 years ago. Like, this is so important.
I wish I had me 10 years ago. I'm talking to I had this weird idea when I was first starting to figure out TikTok. I was like, Mo, maybe I should go on there and talk to 16-year-old girls who don't know shit and think they do. And now they're watching TikTok and they're thinking, oh, this is how things are supposed to work, because TikTok is such a dangerous place for our 13-year-old kids and our 16-year-old kids and our 18-year-old kids and for our 35-year-old kids like me. It's not the safest space. And I am speaking to my 17-year-old self, my 15-year-old self, as much as anybody, because I don't want this story to be my daughter's stories or my son's stories. I don't want them to do this to somebody else.
That right there, I mean, that was my main driver. I mean, I truly did not realize how much of my issues that impact my entire life, mind you, center around sex and and sexuality and sexualization. Like, I didn't even know. The question that I have for you, I guess it's kind of a pivot, but I feel like it's still in line with the conversation. There are a lot of people that live in households where the prior generation doesn't even talk about sex. They don't like sex. It's uncomfortable. Like, personally, for me, my family doesn't really listen. Watch, this is me, the one episode my mother listens to. But like, my parents, my mom, my grandma have always spoken so negatively about sex. It was a job that had to be done. They didn't like
Okay.
it. It was bad. And so for me, I was not expecting to enjoy sex at all. I probably did not start enjoying it until just a few years ago when I began to understand that, wait, sex is for me too. Like that was a realization in my mid 20s. I had this realization that sex was for me. But then like, it was either a chore or it was thing that the sluts did. Like there was no middle ground. And I guess I don't even know how to phrase
the thing the sluts did.
Right. Like, I don't know how to phrase the question, but I guess what would your response to be to, or what would you say to someone who grew up in that environment?
It sounds to me like there's a lot of sex trauma going on and sex shame going on. And there's a story of an individual that I was told once, a boy in school, and he was told he was doing like some class, like health class where you're learning about the anatomy, you're learning about organs, and so part of that means you're learning about the human anatomy, you're learning about sex organs, you're learning about things about reproductive systems. Now, on one hand, let's just be clear, schools will teach the reproductive systems of frogs, but not humans. So that's a problem. For some reason, this child was looking at a textbook that was showing the anatomy of a male and female. And so there was anatomy of I think, male genitalia, maybe female, I don't remember. And this child wasn't able to fulfill their homework duties. Because this child was told by a parent that this is pornographic, you shouldn't look at it. So this child failed that entire grade because of sex shame that that child did not engage in. This is the kind of sex shame that is happening in our religious cultures, because another part of that story is that there's a religious aspect to that. So that just infuriates me. And that's all. I don't even know what else to say. That's my story. But that's an example to me of sex shame and a misunderstanding of what sexuality is, what sex is supposed to be, what is pornography. And if you go to our Supreme Court, I believe it is, and you go like look them up online and go click the Google and find the right website, they'll tell you, well, what is pornography? Well, I don't know, but I know it when I see it. That's the definition that our legal system currently has on pornography. I believe it's the Supreme Court. It's as high as you can go. So I don't know. Is our textbooks, is that pornography? Ask the Supreme Court. Apparently they'll know when they see it.
So what's all of that? Just start to finish all of that. Like, and these are the things, this is why, like, I am so passionate about being open with my son. Like, I told my son growing up, like, there's a penis and there's a vagina. Do we have silly names that we say sometimes because they're funny? Yes. I call my vag a cooch. I'll say vag, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, he knows what a vagina is and he knows what a penis is. I just live in a house full of boys and we say cooch, we say balls, we say testicles, the whole 9 yards. But the thing is that people get so upset with me when they find out that my son loves watching birth videos. Like, he is 7 years old and is obsessed with watching babies being born, like straight out of the vagina. He loves it. He's so fascinated by it. And I have no issue with showing him that. It's a cool thing. And he cries every time. And he's so upset that I don't have a birth video for him. And people are appalled. And they're like, isn't that inappropriate? And I'm like, how is it inappropriate for him to see a human life being brought into the world? And they want to talk about how it's sexual.
He cries like emotionally because he's seeing a baby being born.
Yeah, he thinks it's beautiful. Like, he cries and he's just like, it's so beautiful. And like when he sees a mom breastfeeding, he knows, he's like, oh, she's giving the baby boob juice. How cool is it that our body's doing that at 7 years old? And yet we've got grown adults out here acting like that's a horrible thing because I'm sexualizing my son. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're the one who's sexualizing my son. So like, okay, Now I'm like on this, right? Like you've unlocked all of these things in my brain and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go on a tangent on each of them. So I guess what we need to do from here is how do we begin to process through and work through the sex shame? Because I truly believe that sex shame is at the root of a lot of our problems, especially regarding relationships and romantic relationships.
I totally agree. And that's why when you go onto my website, you'll see erase the shame, I think it is, or I actually forget right now, but my erase the shame, erase the taboo, get rid of that shame around sex, because that shame around sex doesn't do anything to help anybody. So what's the first thing that we do? And again, like, I don't think anybody can convince me otherwise, is the first thing you have to do to get rid of that sex shame is you've got to talk about it. And listening to this podcast and listening to this episode and just listening to the full conversation and allowing these ideas to permeate and just resonate with these ideas, that's being part of the conversation. That's the first step. You're just listening. You're listening and you're taking it in. Don't just listen and then, or let it go in one ear and out the other, and then go off to your job and not think about it. Don't listen to this while you're doing something else where that takes your brain away from what you're listening to. Pay attention to all of the conversations that are happening. All of them. They're happening everywhere. They're happening in television. They're happening right here. They're happening in your home. They're happening with your friends. They're happening in church. They're happening at your work. They're happening all the time. So listening is the first step in being part of the conversation. And then when you have something to say, or the idea, or a new belief, or like, oh, I thought this and now I know this because of this, that's when you start to take part of the conversation and say, well, actually, I used to think this and now I think this because I learned this. Now it's really, really hard to do that especially in certain situations. It's really, really hard. So creating a safe space to practice having these conversations is really important, whether that's a spouse, a best friend, a pastor, a counselor, a therapist, a coach, whatever that is. That's how we get rid of the shame. We stop making it so taboo. The fact that a woman is walking down the street with a thong hanging out doesn't make her a slut. It means a couple things. It means maybe she forgot that her thong was that high up on her waist. It means maybe that's the most comfortable way to wear it. It means maybe that's the kind of outfit she wants to wear. It means that's what she's been taught is attractive. It means so many other things other than the fact that she's a slut. And I make that comment because I was taught that if you saw a person's not just their underwear, if you saw their thong, if you saw underwear, they're granny panties and that's gross. But if you saw a thong, that's sexual and it's slutty, period. When you say a tramp stamp, what's the first thought that comes to your mind most often than not? It's a tramp stamp. That's not accurate. That doesn't mean that she was a slut when she was 20 years old when she got that. It doesn't mean she's a slut because she got it, as a 35-year-old woman today. It means she wanted to have that tattoo because she wanted to feel probably sexy, sensual, awesome, amazing. None of those are bad things, but we want to turn them into a bad thing.
I feel like I keep saying it. I need to get like a mic prop because I can't drop this mic because I can't afford a new one. But like, I want to get just like a prop mic so I can just drop it because that right there, so much of that. And actually, I would love to stop and talk about that for a second. This idea of sensuality and wanting to feel good and wanting to feel attractive for myself is seen as such a negative thing because one, I'm obviously doing it for a man. I don't put on blue eyebrows for a man, just so we're clear, like, no. And two, what if I just want to feel good for me, but I feel guilty because I want to feel good for me? I mean, even in my own body, regardless of how much fat I have on my body at a given time, I am very, 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 very curvy. And there is an outfit that my best friend could wear who is less curvy. I put on the same thing, but it's inappropriate for me to wear it because it looks slutty because you could see my curves. But
I want to see that outfit now. Please send me that outfit because I'll be like, girl, you should wear it.
Dude, I don't
believe in the construct anymore of because of what you wear, because it shows that you have tits, which I'm actually coming to the idea that I think tits is actually a derogatory term for our breasts. Because I mean, you hear people talk about tits, how are they referring to your tits? they're not usually in a kind, positive, sexy, amazing, powerful way.
Mm-mm.
But just because your breasts are being shown and maybe you can see a little nipple and you can see how voluptuous they are, that makes you a slut? Fuck that.
See that? Yes. Cause like, and I struggle with wearing certain things because I got the big tits. I got massive boobs, right? No matter what I wear, you're gonna see that I got tits. Like there's no way around it. Even when I try to just make them disappear because I don't want to deal with them, they're there. But I put on a shirt that shows a little bit of my chest with a little bit of jiggly titty on top, and all of a sudden I'm a horrible human being. And it makes my family uncomfortable. It makes like people stop and they stare. There's a difference between looking and appreciating and looking down on. And the looking down on, I get so much more. And how do you, and I know, how do I phrase this? Because I personally am working on this journey of being so unapologetically myself and just not giving a fuck anymore. I've come a long way. But there is this place where I still struggle with wearing certain things. 90% of the time I dress like a 12-year-old boy and I feel sexiest in sweatpants. You know this, we talked about sweatpants for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But even if I like to wear sweatpants, I like to wear a tighter shirt so you can see that there is a body under here. But I feel so awkward. I feel so weird whenever boobs are involved, whenever my ass is involved.
I get that.
I hate it. How do we move past that? How do we begin to accept ourselves and accept our sexuality and our sensuality as not a negative thing?
So for me, the first thing that I've practiced doing and what I encourage other people to do who are religious like I am is who matters? Does my voice matter? My husband's, my pastor, my friend? None of those voices matter, not even my own. For me, what matters is my God's voice. And so I'm like, does he care that I don't wear a bra while I go to church today? I don't think that he cares if my nipples are showing. That isn't the idea that it's uncomfortable to wear a shirt or pants because it might be sexual, because it might show that you have a body that God gave you. That bothers me because I've lived that my entire Christian career. And in the past year and a half, I ditched that idea and I haven't worn a bra. I have like 10 bras over here in my closet. And I'm wondering, why are they still there? I haven't worn them in over a year, but I have them just in case I need them to fit the social construct that we live in. But when Mr. Sexy and I did some research on like where the bra came from, and basically it came because we wanted our breasts to look sexy we wanted our bodies to be shaped a certain way when we were wearing corsets and those big dresses. And when you look at old time movies, the boobs are just way up there. And it's like, whoa, those are so sexy. There's so much fabric. How is that possible? Like, you don't need to wear a little bit to be sexy. You can wear so many things and still be sexy and sexualized. I don't know if that answered your question.
That is so good. And that is, I mean, I hate this. And this is like, I'm working through that thought process about the bra myself. Majority of the time I have to wear a bra because I've got medical issues and my boobs, they just make everything hurt if they hang. That and the boob sweat is real. But like, aside from that though, I can't imagine going anywhere without a bra on. One time I walked around the block just to go to the mailbox and I always make sure that I wear a hoodie or a really big like baggy shirt so you can't see them. I mean, my nipples point down. Let's be real. I got saggy tits, they point to the ground. You would never see my nipples anyway. Like, for the record. But like, I can't, why are floppy titties so offensive? I don't understand.
Because, okay, why are they so offensive? Because our bodies as women are over-sexualized by our misogynistic men that we have, who kind of run the country, who kind of run the world. I have some TikTok videos that I won't put out because I was doing like a cute little dance, and my boobies are all over, but on opposite ends. So one's going up, one's going down, and they're flip-flopping while I'm trying to do this cute dance to like talk about. And I wanted the caption was supposed to be about Kegel exercises, about strengthening your vagina. No one's going to think about my vagina if they're looking at my boobs going up and down and to and fro. Like, it was a mess. got to figure out a different way to make that message clear. I'm not going to put that out there. TikTok will just take it down. TikTok doesn't like that kind of stuff from me. For me, how I started to be comfortable, because I understand that like boob sweat and the heaviness of breasts and that they cause back pain, that's a very real thing. I'm blessed. I have like size B, 38B size cups, like boobs right now. Like they're not huge. They're not super, super tiny. They're still there. But the thing about me and my boobs is my nipples are exceptionally large, like 1/4 of an inch. Like they're long. I will take them out, my boobs out at parties when I'm drunk, or now even when I'm sober, because I've realized when I do things drunk, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll do it now when I'm sober. And that is my life. So I'll take my boobs and be like, look at how long, look at how big my nipple is. Isn't this the biggest nipple you've ever seen? And 9.5 times out of 10, it is. And those are the nipples that I wear in my little tank top when I go to my Christian counseling, when my pastor comes over to my house, when I go to, well, we're going to start going back to church in person, when I go to Safeway. And Mr. Sexy, as my conservative husband, he notices, yeah, I just got to get used to that, guys. You're just going to look at you and that's just the way it is. And it is not our job to make sure that my body's not sexualized, because I don't want the construct of a bra in 95-degree weather. And I don't have to. It's not my job to make sure that I'm not super sexualized. Even, and this is my belief, even if I'm walking through town butt-ass naked, that doesn't mean that somebody should look at me and be like, oh, look at that, and I want all of that. And that doesn't mean that I deserve to be raped just because I walked around naked in town. Yes, I'll get arrested. I understand that's illegal. There's reasons for that. But man, we have sex so messed up. Not even just if you're talking in religious circles, as like a world, as a society. There are so many things that are messed up about sex. Sex is used in so many bad ways.
There's so much power to like everything you said. I wish I had B cup boobs. I got lefty over here as an E and then righty as a double D. Like I really wish they'd make up their mind and just at least be the same damn size. But
right,
like that is a thought. I have never processed the thought that it's not my job to make sure my body isn't sexualized. I 100% know the thought that like, no matter what I do, no one has a right to rape me. No one has a right to touch me. And the whole objectification thing. Am I pretending to be a Barbie? Am I saying that I'm a doll? Am I painting myself to look like a doll and saying, use me as like a Barbie? That's objectification. Why? Because I'm making myself an object. Anyway, all of that other.
I believe that's in large part why we dress the way that we do. That's what is a bra for? Every time I thought about what should I put my bra on today because of who I'm going to see or where I'm going. Well, what's the purpose in me wearing a bra today? Every single time the purpose was to make me be more sexy, for men to look at me. And this is me as a married woman. And this is me 6 months ago. And I love my husband but this is the thought that I've had. Going to wear a bra because I want my boobs to be pushed up, because I want to be more attractive, because I want to be skinnier, because that's apparently what is sexy and what is good. Number 2, the second reason is, well, what if somebody looks at me and sees my nipples and they go off at home and they watch porn and they masturbate and they're thinking about me? That's so gross. That's so dirty. That's so sinful. I should make sure I wear a bra to make sure none of those things happen. Those are the 2 reasons that I would wear a bra. Those are not the reasons for me to put clothing on my body in that way. The reason for me to wear a bra is because it makes me feel confident, because it makes me feel sexy, because I like the way that I look, because I like the way that I feel. It's about me, not about the stranger who's going to happen to see me at Safeway.
That I have never heard someone else actively vocalize about pushing your chest up, pushing your boobs up.
Really?
And this is because like I have this thought all the time. And I, a couple of years ago, asked someone, a buddy at the time, why, if it was even sexy, because I have always been self-conscious of my boobs. I fell asleep one day, literally with like B cup, and I woke up with D. I don't remember anything in between. I never had the cute perky tits. I never had, ever. They weren't there, and then they were there, and they were to my knees. Like that was always the thing. So I never experienced the whole nice, they stay up and look nice, whatever. But I asked him, I said, it's like, because I don't feel attractive. Like even when I would put on lingerie or whatever, if it didn't have a lot of support, I didn't feel attractive. Because if they were floppy, I didn't feel hot. And I said, is like, does it bother you that my boobs are so floppy? Like, is this a thing? Like, is it a turnoff or is it hotter when they're up? And he's like, I mean, sure, it's hot when they're up to your chin, but I also don't mind them either way. Like, I prefer to have them where I can get to them. But, and that for me, because in my mind, of course, what I believe about myself is what everybody believes about me. And so to hear that someone genuinely didn't care about my floppy boobs blew my mind. And so how or why, what am I asking here? How do we reach a place where we stop caring about what the person at Safeway is going to think, where we start dressing the way we want to dress solely for the reason that we want to dress that way, instead of for, you know, for a church or for the grocery store or for going out or with our friends or, does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Because that's something that I'm still walking through in different areas. I gain more and more confidence the more and more that I'm continuing to ditch my bra. And because I've been doing this for over a year and it's still really, really hard. And so the questions that I ask myself are, well, who is the ultimate authority here? For me, it's God. After that, how do I feel about me? How does my husband feel about me? Beyond that, for me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter so doing it, dressing how you want to dress in a comfortable setting where you feel safe, for me was the first step. So we haven't been to in-person church in a year since COVID. So I haven't been to in-person church doing that. We've been on Zoom things and whatever, and I wear my clitoris earrings and whatever, but I haven't been to in-person church yet, and I'm going to, but I've been to church functions. And I still struggle with wanting to fold my arms across my boobs because I know that my nipples are pointing out, to know that there's a fan right next to me, even though it's 90 degrees, because of the fan on me, my boobs, my nipples, they just stick out. I'm very blessed with my boobies. And it's practice. It takes practice, and it's just my passion right now. It's how I'm fighting the patriarchy. It's how I'm fighting the misogyny. And I have to remind myself over and over and over again that God made my breasts and my nipples. And just because I have them doesn't mean that somebody else gets to think something else of me. Like, and if they do, who cares? That's not who I'm here for. I'm here for you, Karleigh. I'm here to talk about this stuff. I'm here to tell you that if you don't want to wear a bra, that you don't have to. If a bra makes you feel comfortable, then you should. Because if I had bigger boobs and dealt with more boob sweat, I would be wearing a bra. I'd be probably wearing different kinds of clothing, to be honest. I'd be figuring out, well, what bras are actually comfortable? How do I want to look? How do I want to feel? Do I want to wear a sports bra? Or do I want to find shirts with built-in bras? Or do I want to formulate my own company that builds comfortable clothing that doesn't feel like a bra that's so constricting, and that maybe there's so much to do here. And I'm not the person to design clothing. I'm not like the boob talker here, but there's a lot of space to move, and we don't have to make our bodies look a certain way because we've been told that that's what's attractive. Because at the core, like, isn't that true? When we watch TV, the same types of TV shows, for me, it's like Grey's Anatomy. Right now I'm watching Scandal. I watch The Bachelor. I watch their shows and I drink my way through them. They all have these elements of sexuality and how you dress. And it teaches us what we are putting in our brains, what we're telling ourselves in our brains, what we are allowed to infiltrate into our brains shapes how we think about things. And it takes a lot of effort to change that. A lot, wouldn't you say?
Oh, so much. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking that I have come a long way, but I'm not nearly as far as I thought I was. I'm like all of a sudden finding all of this like internalized misogynistic shit come up, and I'm like, oh, I thought I was past this. I know we
are on our own journeys. We're all on our own journeys.
I know we're running out of time, but I do want to.
Oh, we're fine. You're fine.
Ask you. What is one thing, or what are the top three, however you want to do it, the top things or thing, I hate being told one thing, I have like 50 things come to mind, that you would suggest for people to begin to explore their sexuality, to explore becoming comfortable with their sexuality?
The first part is the fact that you're listening to this right now. That's the first step. You're just listening to it. You're listening to different conversations. You need to go listen more. To be the best advocate, to have the most knowledge, to be quite honest, you have to be the best listener. When you see people going off on social media and stories on Facebook, talking about all these things and constantly talking about them every single day, they're talking about something new. And a lot of times they're probably different, even topics, but are they taking the time to actually listen and figure out for themselves what they think? So for you who are listening right now, this is the first step. You listen, you take what you want. This isn't mean that you have to believe every single thing that like Karleigh and I have been talking about, right? You can decide, oh, that's an interesting idea. You take that idea and you just sit with it for a little bit. That's the first step. And then you get to vocalize it with somebody else. And that doesn't mean you go put it on social media and say, I listened to one podcast and I learned this about boobies and I'm not using the word tits anymore. And I'm going to make sure I never wear a bra again. And I'm fighting. That's fighting my fight. That's fighting Karleigh's fight. That's not yours. That's not your story. You know, it's so important to listen. And then because when you have something to actually say, people will actually listen. That's just my opinion. So to move past all this garbage in your head, all this sex shame, all this sex shit, listen first, educate yourself by watching and listening to things you wouldn't normally do. I have a podcast called Freedom Between the Sheets. There's another podcast that is not Christian. And I say that just because people who listen to me, like, they're really interested in a Christian perspective. So I like to make it known, like, I don't just listen to Christian people. Sex with Emily is a great podcast about sex. I've made many connections because of her podcast, and I'll comment on her social media sometimes. And like, oh, that's cool. There's a Christian who talks about the same stuff that she does because I'm a Christian, and now I can relate to this. That's really important. So when you can listen, just listen. And that's a really long way to say, like, listen and formulate your own ideas based on your morals and your values. You don't have to have the same beliefs that I do. You don't have to be a Christian, but you probably have some of the same issues that I do as a Christian woman, because it's America. Like, it's not just a religious problem. I just happen to be in that circle, and it happens to be a little bit more taboo. But the problems are the same for everybody, I believe. So listen, pay attention. What do you think?
That is so good. I love that. And that is something I wrote down the Sex with Emily podcast because I have realized I need a lot more of that in my life. One final thing, I keep saying one final thing. I'm like the annoying mom who says we'll leave in 5 minutes and then we leave in an hour. One final thing that I wanted to ask is, I know you talked about communication a lot and you have to feel comfortable talking about these things, but there are some people, and this was my issue for a really long time until I found people like you who were just talking about it. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm allowed to? If you are scared to communicate these things, if you are uncomfortable, where do you start? Because there are some people, like, you may not even know if it's okay to talk to your friends or to your partner or certain things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So me as the authentic, vulnerable person who's like, I share all of my shit to the people who are around me. That has also gotten me into trouble where I got kicked out of church because I was too vulnerable, too open, too raw, too honest. There is fear there, and it's very, very real. It's very legitimate. And I get that. And when I got my ass into counseling, it took us a bit because she's like, you can't just spill your guts to strangers. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm authentic. I'm real. Whatever. But that's not safe. That's not safe. You do have to vet who you're allowing into those parts of your life. And I didn't do that. I didn't vet anybody. I just assumed because I was in a church or because I had these certain friends with these that check these certain boxes that I would be safe. And that's just not true, because human beings are human beings. So if you cannot talk to your significant other about it, because maybe you've tried, maybe you've said, hey, can we talk about our sex life a little bit? Just like that. And they're like, fuck no, what do you want to say about us? Or if they just came off, just that's not a safe space for me right now. Then my best advice is you pay for that relationship. You pay for a counselor, you pay for a therapist, you pay for it with your money. And you might sit there and say, well, I'm working at McDonald's and I don't have the capital to make that happen. I have a belief that you can. And even if you're not a Christian and you don't resonate with being a Christian and that's not part of your world, that's where I found my free counseling. I started off by paying her $35 an hour. She's a certified counselor who works with a company, a program in our area that helps with recovery for addicts and other things. It went from paying $35 an hour, and I'd only go once a week, maybe every other week, to she quit asking me for money. And I don't know exactly why, but there's just, even if she didn't quit asking me for money, and then at that time we still I wasn't sure we could afford her. I wasn't sure we could afford $35 an hour, but I knew that my marriage, I knew that me, myself, my family, my relationships, God, I needed a safe place. And that's where I found it. And because of I spent $35 an hour for counseling, I finally owned up to the fact that this might be a bomb and we don't need to go into details, but I finally was able to voice to Mr. Sexy about my affair that he already knew about, but we had never been able to talk about. And that's all wrapped into this conversation about sex. That's all wrapped into my story that I'm not ready to tell in full circle yet. But that's the power of spending just $35 a week to get some help when you don't know what the fuck to do. And that's where I was,
Jessica, I am so grateful for you. I am so grateful for your vulnerability and your openness. I say this all the time. I don't think anyone is entitled to our stories. You're not entitled to mine. I'm not entitled to yours.
Mm-hmm.
But if we are drawn to share, I truly believe we're supposed to, because our stories, our voices are so powerful. And there's so much out there. There's so much impact that can be made. And I feel it deep in my soul that a life is being so touched and so changed right now. Thank you so much for taking the time. Where can we all connect with you, get to know you, work with you? I know I need some more Jessica in my life. I know you got the podcast. Let's talk all the things.
Okay. So, number one, you're here, you like podcasting, look up Freedom Between the Sheets podcast. You'll see my sexy face. With Mr. Sexy on top of me. And also Jessica Lee Biles, JESSICALEIGH, B as in boy, ILES. That is how you can find me on any of the social medias that I'm on, which is basically Instagram and TikTok when I'm in the mood to be trolled.
The TikTok, man.
Yep. If I want to get trolled, I will put my stuff on TikTok. That is what will happen.
You know what? I love your fire. I love your energy. I am so grateful for you. And you're making me want to pour myself a glass of wine. For those of you who aren't watching the video, I don't know. It looks like wine. Maybe it's not wine, but she just looks so chill.
It's not wine. So earlier I was like, it's a cocktail of sorts. It's not like a ton of anything. Cause it's 2:30 in the afternoon here right now. But I was like, so here's what's funny. I have a cup of water with melted ice. And I have my cocktail. Cause I was like, I think in the beginning, maybe if it's appropriate, if I have a window, I'll be like, hey, Karleigh, I'm drinking a cocktail, and I'll clink my ice water because this was too full to clink. But now we know at the end of the episode, I'm double fisting and I've got ice water in one hand to show the listeners. I'm day drinking right now. This is where my life's at. And also I have a really pretty pink cocktail. It's just gorgeous.
It's so pretty and it's making me, all right, I think I'm gonna have to pour myself a glass of wine. I'll mix it with
I'm also drinking anything, especially when it's a color that you like, in a fancy glass, like a wine glass. It's just awesome feeling. And I'll just drop this message. I do things like that just to feel good. I will pour myself a cocktail instead of being in a mason jar, which sometimes a mason jar that it calls for that. Sometimes I want to feel fancy. So I will put ice water. I will put soda. I'll put my cocktail in a fancy ass wine, big oversized wine glass, because I want to feel good. And I think that's okay. So if you want to wear a bra to feel good, wear the damn bra, but you don't need to wear it to be sexy or sensual or attractive, especially to a stranger. Like,
I am so in love with you. I mean, straight up, like, us. Okay, so
well,
Karleigh
you
watch YouTube. Go watch the video. Go watch the video. This is so good. I'm gonna clip that. Like, that's gonna be a reel.
You can totally do it. One of my favorite things is to make fun of myself. And like, when I do this motion, my kids know what that means. We have a little code, and this means something. So this is the end of the, like, now we're getting real. Like, this is the people who have waited till this point. Like, this is the real JB. Like, this is the real Karleigh JB conversation.
It is so good. I mean, no, I think I'm gonna go to the dollar store and get myself a fancy wine glass now, because I was just gonna use a mason jar. But now I think I'm gonna go.
You definitely should.
Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna go and get it. I think I'm gonna get some glitter and some Mod Podge, and I'm gonna glitter up a wine glass, because that just sounds so nice right now.
Post it, and then you post it and be like, "This is from. I just recorded this podcast episode. You should go listen to my podcast. Here it is. You'll know why I'm doing this thing, because I drew boobs on my fancy wine glass.
Oh, glitter tits. Okay, I'm doing it. It's happening.
Okay. Also, you might enjoy this chick. I think her Instagram handle is Giggles and Bits, and you can DM me to make sure that's right. But she is hilarious because she makes like little boobies to put places. She has like a mug that I saw on her Instagram account that there's boobs coming out of. She's got these like hide a booby thingies where there's little boobies, and you put them like in a tree in your plants that you have around your house, so that people are really into your plants. Like, oh, is that a tit? Yeah, that's a tit. What? A tit with a nipple? That's pornographic. Get that out. She's pretty funny. I want her on my podcast. I haven't gotten her yet, but I'm going to. It's Giggles and Bits or something like that, and she's funny.
Oh my God, Jessica, I feel like I need to apologize to non-stuck-up Christians everywhere, because when you hear Christian, you think of one thing, and I genuinely,
oh my gosh, yeah.
I saw the dancing vagina, and I knew that you were something special, but now I'm just like, you are my kind of person. You are my kind. We all need that person that shares our beliefs. We can talk about sex and not be judged. Jessica, I love you, and I appreciate you so friggin' much, and I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much. This was so fun, Karleigh. This was the only job thing I had to do today. So I've actually been looking forward to this, and I don't say that often. So thank you for being so fun and letting me have my moments and just giving me a voice. I appreciate it.